Module 8, the early Heian period dated to 794 to 897. I, Dr. Rita Pratap, former head of the department, University of Rajasthan, Jaipur. I am going to speak on the early Heian period dated from 794 to 897. During the early Heian period, Shingons and Mandalas were popular. The teaching of the Shingon focuses on the essential unity of the nominal and phenomenal, that is, the spiritual and the physical worlds. These are represented by the painted or sculpted illustrations of the diamond and womb mandalas, respectively. Two mandalas are particularly important and outstanding for esoteric Buddhist sects of the period, the Garbhadhatu and the Vajradhatu. These mandalas are nearly always laid out geometrically on a grid pattern or in a circle or a combination of the two. The early Heian period. The 8th century had witnessed the geographical spread of Buddhism when Emperor Shomu ordered all the provinces to build 7-story pagodas to house copies of the Kongo-kai Mandala, the realm protecting sutra, and followed this later with an order to build full temples. Not long before, a disastrous epidemic of smallpox had numbered among its victims the heads of the 4 branches of the Fujiwara family. Since then, these Kokubunji were supervised by imperially appointed priests whose nearest neighbors were the governors of the provinces in their kokufu. The combination was seen as an undisguised attempt to extend government controls. As such, and as financial burdens, the temples gained little favor with the local people. In fact, many were the object of arrasion during peasant revolts, and most are no more than preserved archaeological sites today. Their unpopularity elicited threats on the monks who, for their part, were confined to their monasteries with orders to avoid contact with the people. Shomu had obviously been able to spread Buddhism by edict and institutionalize it as a state religion. But beyond its political impact, it had no measurable philosophical significance. Kamo ascended the throne in 781. In 784, the transfer of the capital to Nagoka proved to be a disaster. Despite the wonderful flowering of art that took place there, Nara did not long remain the capital of Japan. In 794, Emperor Kamo transferred the seat of the government to Heian-kyo, the peace capital, the present-day Kyoto, some 20 miles north of Nara. His reason for moving the capital was to escape the domineering influence of the monasteries and the political interference of the powerful Naga clergy. The change of capital is regarded as ushering in a new era in the history of Japan, the so-called Heian period. The better to consolidate the imperial power, it was the policy of the early emperors in the new capital to foster cultural relations with China. This led to the introduction into Japan of the 2 Buddhist sects, Tendai and Shingon, which exerted a shaping influence on art. In 804, two great religious monks leaders, Saicho from 767 to 822 and Kokai from 774 to 835, established schools of Buddhism which were to have lasting effects on Japanese life. They accompanied a Japanese embassy to China. Saicho, who had never been fully satisfied with the formalism of the old Nara doctrines, had spent 12 years in hermitage on Mount High, north of Kyoto, and at the end of a long spiritual quest, it was brought home to him the source of Buddhism. Truth lay in Hokkaido, or Lotus Sutra of the Good Law. He pursued his studies in China, and upon his return to Japan in 805, he founded the monastery of In Raikuji on Mount Hei, which became the center of the new Tendai sect. His doctrine, which proclaimed the equality of all living beings before the Buddha, though opposed by the clergy, but supported by the imperial family, his monastery was in time officially empowered to confer ordination on new monks, and it unquestionably gave a new lease of life to the Japanese Buddhism. The other great religious teacher, Kukai, had studied in the Tang capital, Chang'an, where he initiated himself into the purely esoteric Shingon sect, Chen Yen in Chinese, mantra in Sanskrit. He returned to Japan in 806 and in 816 founded the Kongo-ji monastery in the fastness of Mount Koya, far from the capital. In 823, he was put in charge of the official Toji temple, or more correctly, Koyogo-kukuji at Kyoto, and it became another center of Shingon Buddhism. Painting of the Jogan period is extremely rare, but those few available are worth discussing. Shingon and the Mandalas. The teaching of Shingon focus on the essential unity of the nominal and the phenomenal, or the spiritual and the physical worlds. These are represented by paintings or sculpture illustrations of the diamond and worm mandalas respectively. The mandalas derived by the esoteric sects from China came into being at this time and continued to be made almost to modern times. Now a mandala is simply a diagram, a graphic representation of the cosmos or of the relationships among various deities. As an object of meditation, however, a mandala is an instrument to bring about psychic union between the devotee and the Supreme Buddha. Mahavairochana, or Great Sun, the universe of Dainchi Nyorai, that is, greatest of all Buddhas. These mandalas were suspended on either side of the altar in the hall where the ceremonies were conducted. Two mandalas are particularly important and outstanding for the esoteric Buddhist sects of the period. The Garbhadhatu Taizo is the worm circle containing some 407 deities in 12 sections, explaining principles and causes. The Vajradhatu Kongo-kai, the diamond circle with some 1314 deities in 9 sections expounding reason and effect. Naturally, the Supreme Buddha, Dainchi Nyorai, is at the core of each mandala or diagram explaining the complex Shingon hierarchy. Each of the myriad deities is an emanation from and acting for Dainchi Nyorai. The mandalas combine representations of the Buddha and the Bodhisattva with extreme symbolism, attributes of deities and Sanskrit letters and germ syllables imbued with magical powers. The images are arranged according to a rational and cosmological significant scheme of interrelationships. Thus, the mandalas are nearly always laid out geometrically on a grid pattern or in a circle or a combination of the two. Womb mandala. Detail showing Tibetan influence. This is ink colors on silk belonging to Heian period dated to 859 to 880 AD. The womb phenomenal world is represented by a series of concentric squares, the innermost of which contains an 8-petal red lotus with a Buddha sitting on each petal. As Yanagisawa Taka has shown, the mandala here illustrated is one of the earlier Shingon polychrome mandalas painted in Japan. It is a copy of a pair commissioned by Emperor Montoku and produced in Tang Changan under the supervision of the prelate Fakuan and painter Daikuing, and brought back to Japan by the Japanese monk Anchin in 859 AD. They retain the strong shading and high color contrast typical of Tibetan painting. Following Buddhist persecutions, Changan had to replace the Buddhist text and art from Dunhuang caves, which had been under Tibetan occupation between 786 and 843, but otherwise show several signs of Japanization, of departure from the Sino-Tibetan model. In particular, the way in which the faces of the deities exhibit a variety of expressions and look in different directions is indicative of an interest in individual particularities, which appears in subsequent Japanese Buddhist art, involving groups of apsaras, attendants or worshippers. Dainchi Nyorai is in the center. The Bodhisattvas, Myo, Aklas and 10 Devas and other deities are ranked in decreasing size about the central square. The mandalas of the diamond nominal world has 9 equal sized square mandalas forming a single large square. The believer's task was to contemplate aspects of the mandalas and by means of such meditation and other rites to realize Buddhahood in this human realm. The mandala is said to have started as an array of ritual utensils on an altar floor of the Sumerian, representing Mount Sumeru. When used like a carpet, it received too much wear, so the scheme was transcribed to painting on paper or silk hung. In the Kongo-kai Mandala, detail of central section called Joshinkai, gold on purple silk, Kojima-dera, Kyoto, Japan. The central square contains the 5 most important deities with Dayanshi in the center. The Buddhas of the 4 directions are the central figures in each of the 4 large circles, and the deities of the 4 elements occupy the 4 smaller circles. The geometric and primarily intellectual placement gains aesthetic appeal from its subtly abstract arrangement and its gold and dark blue coloring. Indeed, the Kojima-dera mandalas are 11th century versions with variations of a much earlier and finer. Its sadly damaged pair preserved at Jingo-ji, Kyoto. The Taizo Mandala Detail, gold on purple silk, Jingo-ji, Kyoto, Japan, belongs to early Heian period. In this painting, Bodhisattva is attended by 2 angel musicians who are dancing, like those seen in the foregrounds of representations of the Western paradise at Donghuang in the northwest China. The same trend towards a more indigenous art also occurs in Buddhist painting. The decoration of the 5-story pagoda of the Daigo-ji near Kyoto, built in 951 at the behest of the Emperor Murakami, well exemplifies the transitional style. On the first floor of the pagoda, which occupies an area of 530 square feet, the eye is caught at once by a large, colorful composition full of deities arranged in 4 vertical panels, each about 102 by 27 inches around the central pillar. These are the main elements of the 2 fundamental mandala of the Shingon sect, the Taizo on the west, north and south panels, the Kongo-kai on the east panel, seen against a dark blue background spangled with golden stars, their size varying in accordance with their positions in the celestial hierarchy. The gods are portrayed on lotus seats with unflattering skill, surrounded by aureoles of different colors. Large composition of the world of reason, Taizo detail Shichi-gutai, Bodhisattva and other divinities, 931, wall painting on a wooden panel. Pagoda of the Daigo-ji, Kyoto. This most highly refined expression is reserved for 16-armed Shichi-gutai Bodhisattva, Kundi Bhagwati, and this figure, as it so happens, is also best preserved. The main outlines in black of the god's body were filled in with light yellow, then contours and features were drawn in red. The rather heavy modeling of the 9th century has disappeared and colors are brighter and more harmonious. The lightness of the red outlines contributes to the effect of clarity which so sharply distinguishes this work from the esoteric painting of the previous century, imbued as they were with the late Tang style. The decoration of the costume, however, remains very simple, and the prevailing patterns, the shape on the scarf, for example, still resemble those which decorate the polychrome statues of the 9th century. The secondary gods of the 2 mandalas are continued on the 4 inner columns, 2 of which no longer exist, and on the upper half of the 8 side panels. The Taizo Kai arrangement always remaining on the west side, the Kongo-kai arrangement on the east. The small divinities on the side panels are handled in a very free style. Another example is of Senshuku Ardha, one of the 7 stars, secondary divinity. Details of the side wall dated 951. Wall painting on the wooden panel, pagoda of the Jingo-ji, Kyoto. In the illustration, Senshuku Ardha, one of the 7 stars, has a particular grace born of serene colors and linear rhythms. Here, on the lower part of the side panels, figure the portraits of the 8 patriarchs of the Shingon sect, from Ryumo Nagarjuna, its Hindu founder, to Kukai. Fudo is a form of Dainchi and one of the favorite deities in Japan. He is the patron god of the samurai, known for wisdom invoked to bring rain, the destroyer of evil. As the immovable one, he sits on a symbolic rock dramatically backed by flames, holding a sword and rope. Variations come only in number of attendants, usually a pair of youth, but occasionally 6 or even 8 red Fudo figures are most common. A few are blue and yellow. The representational picture that correspond to the sculptures, particularly in those icons representing the terrible aspects of deities. These manifestations are epitomized by famous red Fudo Myo-o. Color on silk, Myo-in, Koyasan, Wakayama Prefecture, Japan, belonging to early Heian period. A representation of an historic deity dubbed the immovable, a terror to evildoers. Adamant upon his rock, Fudo sits attended by his usual 2 youthful acolytes, glaring out past the worshipper. The composition filling the frame from the very bottom at the attendant's feet to the top, where the red flames reach even beyond the edge, produces a massive effect controlled by the figures, especially Fudo, whose red color dominates the whole conception. The expression of the deity with one fang up and the other down, and rolling glaring eyes, combines with Vajra handled sword, a materialized thunderbolt with a dragon coiled about its sharpened blade, to produce a convincing pictorial realization of the awesome and the terrible. Fudo's 2 boy attendants, one a proper looking youth and the other with fangs, glaring eyes and unkempt hair, conform to the Jogan physical type. One of the most arresting examples of Jogan pictorial style, despite in bad condition, is a depiction of a lesser deity of esoteric Buddhism, Suiten. Color on silk, Saidai-ji Nara, Japan, belonging to early Heian period. Suiten is a borrowed deity having originated in Hinduism as Varuna, Lord of Waters. These squared, thrown back shoulders and the massive chest proclaim strength. Unlike the bird or animal vehicles of earlier and later periods, which may be rather small, even playful. Suiten's giant turtle vehicle has a dragon-like head, as awe-inspiring and massively convincing as the image it bears. Big sweeping curves from the turtle's neck, the dragon crown, the halo, and the roll of the drapery over the shoulders, recalling the stately rhythms a Homa drapery pattern. The repetition of these curves is one means whereby the artist creates monumentality. One of the major deities in Shingon teaching is Fudo Myo-o, the king of light. Shingon deity Blue Fudo and his doji attendants. It is colors on silk belonging to mid-11th century. This is widely depicted in painting. As a bringer of light and wisdom, he was popular household icon, particularly as his spectacular powers could be invoked by prayer. He looked ferocious with protruding teeth, glowing eyes, and furrowed brow, poised amid billowing flames, holding a double-edged sword in his right hand and a lasso in his left. No earthly evil could match him. Sculptures. Jogan sculptures have survived in great number than paintings and presents one of the truly remarkable sculptural styles in the world. Shaka, Shakyamuni or Miroku, Maitreyi Buddha. Wood. It is made up of wood and at present in Saidai-ji Nara, Japan, belongs to early Heian period, 9th century. The small seated image of Buddha, Shaka, is carved from a solid block of cypress wood. The deity is presented as fleshy with heavy body, almost feminine chest, large round face, wide lips and nose, and elongated eyes. The whole effect is massive. The figure's very simple contours convey monumentality that belies its small size. Another classic Jogan image is of the healing Buddha, Yakushi. It is also made up of wood and at present in the Jingo-ji, Kyoto, Japan. It shows the Jogan style at its most hieratic and formal. The Buddha stands erect, evenly balanced on both feet in a perfectly symmetrical pose, facing the worshipper with no sway, no bending of the head, a pose as rigid and formal as that of the most formal Byzantine icon. The drapery is, in a sense, forced to the edges of the pillar like legs, producing a pattern that, like the figure itself, is symmetrical, balanced, and formal. Another beautiful example is of a sculpture of a portrait of a priest Robin at Saidai-ji Nara, traditionally dated to 1019, is unusual in being extensively polychrome over gesso. The drapery called Home Pashiki rolling wave pattern is composed on high rounded ridges alternating with lower angular ones. In most Jogan sculpture, plain wood forms the principal surface. Color is most sparingly used and applied transparently over the wood. Seated Shaka. It is made up of wood and at present in Myo-o-ji, Nara Prefecture, Japan. Here, a classic example of Homo Pashiki drapery is found on the Shaka at Myoji, a figure which originally had some color applied on a white gesso ground. The folds of the robe are everywhere composed of large rounded waves alternating with shallower waves with pointed profile. Sculpture of Shinto icons began to appear in the late 8th century and increased in number during the 9th century. A female Shinto image is also made up of wood and in the collection of Koryu-ji, Kyoto, Japan, shows a simple variation of the Hompa pattern on drapery folds and is related to the seated Buddha images by her block-like massiveness and by her somewhat severe or at least inward expression. The headdress is aesthetically interesting and also exemplifies the standard upper-class female headdress of the period. Myo-o-in canon, colored wood, and at present in Kanshinji, Osaka, Japan. The sculpture's fine state of preservation and quality make it one of the important Jogan sculpture. The base, the figure, the body halo, mandarola are all original. The six-armed Myo-o-in canon is seated on the lotus pedestal in the traditional posture of royal ease. Two hands hold the wish-granting jewel and the wheel of the Buddhist law from which the icon type derives its name. Two more hold a Buddhist rosary and a lotus, the flower symbolizing purity of soul amid worldly corruption. On the remaining two hands, one touches the cheek in pensive gesture, the other rests palm down on the pedestal, the touch alluding to Kanan's paradise. Shaka and Miroku, it is a stone relief, belongs to early Heian period. In these two stone reliefs of Buddha, a Shaka and a Miroku, characteristic Home-pashiki drapery style is translated into low relief.